I've always loved fighting games. As a child, I lamented over the seeming impossibility of the original Mortal Kombat,
No one beats Sub-Zero.
protested that my older brother wouldn't show me how to do special moves in Street Fighter 2, and tried against all odds to understand what the hell is going on in Clay Fighter. Eventually, as I got older, I started to figure these games out and even get good at a few, or, what I would call good. Until one day, a fighting game came out that blew me away and changed how I look at this genre that I love altogether. A game that boiled fighting games down to their core, and in doing so created a game that embodies the idea of being elegant in its simplicity. That game
Divekick!
is Divekick. Before we get into what makes Divekick a revolutionary fighting game, let's take a look at exactly what this bizarre indie game is. So, the simplest way to sum up Divekick is that at its core, it is a two-button fighter in which each player tries to jump or dive and kick the opponent. Individual characters have hundreds of points of health, but kicks do several thousands of points of damage, meaning that really every hit is a one-hit KO. Then the game expands on that relatively simple formula by giving each of their 15 characters unique jump heights, kick angles, kick speeds, and 2 special moves, one on the ground and one in the air. Special moves don't require any motion inputs, just pushing both buttons simultaneously. And that's it, really. 2 buttons, a small handful of moves, and a health pool that's essentially meaningless. Really, fighting games don't or can't get much simpler. Beyond just the mechanics of this game, however, Divekick is a love letter to fighting games and the community that's built up around them. Nearly every character design choice, voice line, location, special move, and story beat is a reference to fighting games, fighting game tournaments, or in some cases, real-world fighting game personalities. And while it sounds like that might be a really weird choice that would potentially limit the audience of Divekick, the game approaches these references in such a tongue-in-cheek and aware manner with so much charisma that even if you don't get that specific reference, you still care what Divekick has to say and probably still find it funny. That levity plays to Divekick's advantage. You get so invested in this silly game with all of its silly references, and then it sneaks up behind you and makes you fall in love with it with its really unique gameplay. From the perspective of anyone even vaguely familiar with fighting games, Divekick having only 2 buttons must seem limiting to the point where this game is unplayable. After all, a staple of fighting games is chaining together moves into beautiful, long-lasting combos that rack up massive points of damage. Those combos tend to be the make or break point for people looking to get into fighting games. Either players find they love to practice long combos for hours on end until they become muscle memory, or players don't and probably give up the fighting game pretty quickly. Divekick breaks this mold by simplifying combat to just those 2 little buttons. Players don't need to learn any combos, they only need to remember how to dive and kick. This simplicity forces the gameplay of Divekick into a state where you and your opponent know exactly what options you both have from the moment the round starts. That's something that in other fighting games takes months and months of practice or even years to master. With 15 characters, each having a set angle and essentially 2 or 3 options from the round start, the barrier to entry to that level of skill is really low. You don't have to take months to memorize everything about Divekick. The game presents it to you while you play it. And if you don't know exactly how your opponent's character dives or kicks, you'll learn that within the time of a single round, because they have no control over how their character acts, save for jumping, kicking, or special moves. For everyone who plays this game to look at an opponent's character, know exactly what their options are, means that everyone starts at the same level of Divekick. Which means everyone can pick up Divekick and play it at a level they enjoy, because there are exactly enough buttons. Don't fool yourself into believing that just because Divekick has achieved perfect accessibility means that it can't be played at high levels. At its core, Divekick is a game about reaction times and understanding how your character interacts with your opponent's character. While what we discussed earlier is still true that anyone can play Divekick and enjoy it, there will always be people that can take those simple controls and take them to the next level. Divekick allows the players with deeper understanding of matchups to customize their character with gems before the fight that alter their character's core attributes. This gives players an opportunity to press advantages in matchups or to even the playing field in a poor matchup. Divekick is also filled with micro interactions in a match, inching towards your opponent with short jumps and kicks, rapid back kicking to build meter, holding the center line, bluffing out your specials, and many more character-specific interactions all give depth to a game that looks simple from the outside. You may not remember it, but in the game's first year, Divekick was featured at EVO. While the game was still in its infancy, it was easy to see the beginnings of a complicated meta form if top players decided to take it that far. The trick that Divekick manages to pull off so well is making the gap between great players and new players feel smaller than it is. In essence, Divekick fixes the party fighting game problem. What I mean by that is that inherent to the fighting game genre is the fact that one person can get so much better than other individuals in their friends or local group that the game becomes dead to that group, or at the very least, really unfun. No one likes to play Smash Bros with the one friend that's way too good. The reason for that is obvious, that losing by a significant margin feels terrible, so why even bother? Divekick's simple controls, reliance on reaction time, and how easily digestible the matchup data is means that at no point do you feel hopeless in a match. You always feel like in another round or two that you can win. And the truth is, you can. Divekick doesn't just feel accessible to the average player, it truly is. Divekick came out in 2013, and had a couple of updates after that, including the hilariously named Addition Edition. While the initial hype was high with the game, eventually, as happens with all games, that fell off, and the community for it is almost gone at this point. But I believe Divekick should be examined not just by indie fighting game creators, but by all fighting game creators. It's a silly seeming game, and it's easy to think that the 2-button mechanic was nothing but a gimmick that Divekick was propped up on. But it's more than that. Divekick pulls back the veil and allows everyone to see why fighting games are so fun, and why people like me are willing to spend hours and hours practicing. The one-on-one competition and reaching a point where you feel comfortable in a matchup feels great. Win or lose, it's enjoyable. Divekick makes that feeling available to everyone. And that's why I think Divekick is the fighting game perfected.